it was really, really moving for me as a son of a mother and father who moved and immigrated from Italy. The ideas of always wanting to come back home, the ideas of having identity in a culture, really, really resonated for me. And I want to thank you, Anne, and thank you, Luke, for being able to share that with us. Everybody,
thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Everybody that's catching this potentially on YouTube, please do consider to look at everything else that we do have on NDNY. We've been able to explore a lot of different things in the past year, and excited, very, very excited for this discussion here. Everybody else that's on Zoom, thank you so much for sticking around. And we would love to be able to hand it off to Ian and to Bill and lead us in this Q&A. Ian is born in Vancouver, Canada. He's an archaeologist, historian. He's a professor at the Department of Anthropology at Notre Dame. And he lives in this 100-year-old house in Mishawaka with his wife and daughter, and films apparently historic wooden barns when he's not in Ireland. So that's exciting. Bill is a filmmaker and professor at the Department of Film, Television, and Theater at the University of Notre Dame. He's developed films and produced them in a range of social documentaries and narrative film projects. He's grown up on the East Coast in the United States, kind of where we are here in New York, and lives with his wife, family, and golden retriever in Indiana. Bill, something fun about you and I that you might not know that we have in common. You were with Mark and Leo in Bangladesh, filming Strong Bodies Fight. Bill, okay. I was just saying that you and I have something in common with Strong Bodies Fight. You and Mark and Leo together. They're a little bit of a little bit of refreshment towards the film. But thank you so much and congratulations on all of this. One thing that I do want to say before we start the Q&A that hopefully will make a little bit of a smile on all of your faces, because of the continued generosity of our community here in New York and the opportunity of sharing this film. We fundraised for the social and community center in Inishbofin throughout this film and throughout the registration, and have been able to contribute over $1,000 to that community. So Ian, Bill, we will be connecting after the film on the best way to make sure that those funds go over there and continue to help the cultures and the traditions of Inishbofin. So congratulations to all of you, and thank you so much to everybody who contributed and donated to this cause, and also to the Notre Dame Club of New York and our scholarship fund. We are eternally grateful, and thank you. At this point, I will mute myself and allow you all to steal the show. Again, if you are on chat and you'd like to ask any questions, please go ahead and do so, and we'll make sure that we'll try to address them in the next 30 minutes or so. So thanks so much. Bill, Ian, take it away.
All right. Okay, so first of all, our apologies for the COVID-19 moment of technology and all the rest of it. It's one of those crazy things of sort of best plans. We've gone through 2 computers tonight. We've got cut off multiple times. So this has just been on our end.
But we had a backup. I mean, it switched over nicely and we feel like we finished it well. I just to say, we've been sitting here, we haven't revisited this for a while. And, you know, Luke and Ann, you haven't seen this version actually, which is a newer version, certainly. We worked a lot to rework it, and we became even more enamored. And I just have to say, I just miss you guys so much. And I just want to be there. Robin wants to be there. Robin says hello, Ann. Luke.
Hi, Robin.
She doesn't want to be, but she'll be heard. It just makes me just long for it, and I feel a lot of pride in what we did. So I'm glad so many people are watching it, because it's kind of been hard to get out there, because right as we were finishing things.
So let's start. We could start. This is Bill. This is Ian. You've seen Luke and Ann through the film, and you've probably read their bios. We're not going to do any kind of intro in some form. This is a film that sort of has emerged in various organic ways and sort of grown out of basically being on islands and hanging out with Ann, Luke, and a lot of other people at different points. And this is something that's in some ways a very non-traditional project, because instead of a film that has had a script and a purpose and something, this has evolved through conversations with different people, whether you're talking about John J. Halloran in a Dunkin' Donuts, where he first told me this story, and we thought, you know, we need to do a film about this. And then it became a matter of sort of step-by-step following different leads and different pieces, all the way to Alabama to go meet with Jason and talk to him. So this is in some ways quite an unconventional project, because it didn't start out with a specific purpose in mind. And in some ways it's about being in place, being there. So look, what we thought is we'd start off by posing a question to Luke and posing a question to Anne, because in some ways, you know, Bill and I are sort of serving as a narrator for a story and serving as people who can try and talk about some of these stories. But in many ways, this isn't really our story. This is one of thinking about the different things that different people have done and sort of the different worlds that exist in some form. So how about if we start with this before we get to some of the other questions that different people are asking here on screen. Let's talk on a couple different levels about this. First of all, Anne, how about thinking about this? In some ways, this is a film about the old ways, about sort of people and places in the past. Yeah, and years ago, we were talking about the old days, and we were sitting down having conversations. And you made the remark when we were in the Murrays on Inishbofin there and chatting. You made the remark that we were talking about the black caps, the old men who used to be down at the piers and would be in the pub, and you related sort of your respect for them and interest in them. And you made a comment that I thought was really powerful. You said you missed the black caps. What are the black caps? And why did you miss them? Why do you miss them now?
Well, first of all, black caps or flat caps in some cases were synonymous with growing up on Inishbofin when it came to the senior male population. A lot of the older people wore these. I think it was just tradition mainly. But when we were growing up as kids, those older generation, those men who had worked their life, be it on the land, on the sea, whatever they'd done, they used to gather on the old pier down by the harbour. And when I say old pier, they've recently built, in the last 20, 30 years, they've built another one. But the old pier was the main pier in Inishbofin at the time. So that's where everybody gathered if there was anything going on regarding, be it work, be it a meeting, be it, you were sending cattle off to market, so everybody was there to load it. But I remember distinctly as a child, all these men, and they had caps, be it flat or black. And it just made them look like they were, I don't know, superior, or that you had to, it just made you respect them in some way. But they were lovely people. Like you had the likes of old Pat Concannon. He would have been John's father. He also survived the Inishbofin Cleggan disaster in 1927. So you can imagine the history in that face and that cap. You have, if you want to come back to the present day, you have James Coyne, who wears a cap. And James is zooming around Inishbofin. We're zooming to the States tonight. He's zooming around Inishbofin, doing his jobs on a daily basis. He's 91 years old. So there's a lot of mileage attached to that cap. As kids, we would go to, when electricity came to Inishbofin first, in the form of Paddy Murray buying a generator. going back to probably from, in my case, the early 70s. And you had quite a lot of children in West Quarter at that stage, because there were big families of like 6, 7 children in most houses. More, some less than others. But anyway, at 6 o'clock of an evening, remember there's no electricity, no running water as a rule in general. And Paddy would start his generator at 6 o'clock every evening. And then he would go to the bar at the hotel and he'd open the door, whereby he'd be almost run over by about 14 feral children from West Quarter and wherever they appeared from. And we'd go in, we gathered around, summertime, very seldom in there, but in the wintertime we gathered around the fire. Again, Paddy was center stage, and he, you know, it all goes back to respect again. He sat and he ruled the roost. We did what he said, but we got to watch TV. And he'd sit there and supervise. And at 8:30 would be the watershed, max. And at 8:30, he opened the door. You were shooed out, told to go home, which we did, to be met by possibly our parents and grandparents coming to the door in the form of grandfathers, I should say, fathers and grandfathers, I'm sorry. They'd be coming to the door. So they'd be getting ready for the 9 o'clock news. That was on for like half an hour in those days. And directly after the 9 o'clock news, there was a program called Today, Tonight. It was a political program. But all of those men wore caps. And I remember as I got older, coming into Murray's, when I was allowed to be there after 8:30 in the evening, say, and you had this row of men who were all, they'd probably be all from 70 up, and they'd all be sitting having their couple of pints or their glasses of Guinness, discussing the whatever had gone on that day or maybe the week before if they hadn't met. But I remember them all wearing caps, and that's all, that's gone now. There's none of that anymore, apart from, like I said, James Coyne. He's the only one left that goes to Murray's, and there's one other man, Joe Concannon, he wears a cap, and I think that's about all there is today. But for the actual black caps, I think they were more geared towards fishermen as such, or men who worked the sea. So, and most recently, the two I would have grown up with would have been the late John Concannon, who passed away a couple of years ago, who was part of the show tonight, and his brother Andrew. They would have been the last black caps on Buffin. There aren't any left now. So we always just felt like if these men wear caps, then they sort of kind of demanded respect, really, but they'd earned it. So that's my memory of it. And I miss the caps, yes, but I miss sometimes that way of life. My uncle, Paddy Halloran, also, he wore a black cap for all of the years I knew him. And he ran the mail and the ferry from when I was a child up until he was in his, probably he was well into his 80s by the time he actually stayed at home. And then he covered here, and he brought the mail here. He brought it to Inishturk, and probably would have had, he did in his time, as did his father, and John Concannon and Andrew would have had connection with Shark, because they would have brought supplies and they'd have brought ferried passengers, and they'd have brought over the years. So that's my memory of the black cap. And I just always felt that it was part of the island. I suppose it was always part of the island, but I used to think, which I now know is not true, because they are worn in rural Ireland and they're worn in plenty other countries around the world. But But I used to always think they were just here, that nobody else in the world wore a hat but these older men who lived here.
For the audience here, one of the funny things when Bill and I were watching this again tonight, I was watching and all of a sudden I realized all but one of your sons, Anne, is in this film, either on a boat, moving currachs or something similar.
Yeah.
So that's one of those sort of funny observations. So look, moving to another question here. So a certain person by the name of Meredith Chesson wrote in a question and posted one. And she posted it to you, Luke, and then wants you, Anne, to sort of play into this after that. And asked the question, what does this film mean to you?
So to me first, did you say, was it?
You're done and dusted, and not only that, but you're not wearing your Notre Dame t-shirt, so we're deeply disappointed.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on my royalty payments for that, so I decided to hold out until the check arrived. Yeah, and sorry, I'll preface this by saying apologies if anybody hears any screaming in the background. My 18-month-old has just got out of bed by the sounds of things, so there's a bit of a ruckus going on here in the background, so apologies if you hear any background noise. Yeah, I suppose to Meredith's question, it's obviously it's an incredibly poignant film for us to sit and watch. It's also it's the type of film I hope doesn't get made about us in 50 or 60 years time, and by that I mean, you know, I think the islands are in a much better place now than they were in say Festus Halloran's time. There's a sense of hope and optimism for the future at the moment, that I hope will carry us through and is going to see, I suppose, a change in the classic narrative of depopulation and having to go abroad. So I guess that would be my kind of my thoughts on it, is that, you know, it's a history that we can't ever forget about, that these kind of things happened, that people had to leave and had to go to all corners of the world. And, you know, my cousin Oisin, who's in that film, is a case in point. He spent 10 years in New Zealand and has happily since returned full-time, himself and his wife Emily and their little girl. They're back in Boffin full-time. So I suppose we're now in an era where it's feasible for people to move home, young families to move home, whereas I suppose in the time that Festus went to the States, it was never going to be an option that he could even come home for a holiday, let alone ever dream of moving back as a young man with his family and actually carving out a living. So I mean, his story and you know, the whole notion that he was sitting, you know, outside his house making nets to try to cling on to some sort of memory of where he came from. You know, it's heartbreaking in a lot of ways to think about it, but it's also, you know, something I hope that, you know, we don't have to go through. So I suppose it's kind of, there's a sense of optimism and hope for the future of the islands, which I think is important to stress, that, you know, it doesn't have to be this the same kind of story of melancholy, and you know, there isn't the inevitable emigration story that had to happen in those days. I guess would be my kind of my rambling initial answer to that question.
So then, what, given COVID-19 and what's taking place today, and in some ways, you know, over the last 20 years, you know, if this is a film about the leaving and people disappearing from the islands and going to the mainland, going to urban centers, going to America and to the different locations there, you know, over the last 20 years, that's been part of the trend of young people leaving not only Western islands, but also in some ways Ireland. And so to what extent have things changed with COVID-19, and to what extent, what can be done so that people don't have to leave those islands, that people can come back? Because you, for example, you're in Galway, you're an islander, you're deeply connected to that island, but you've had to pursue work off island in some form.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose in my own personal case, there's not a day that goes by where I'm not scheming on how to move home again. if I can convince my partner Sinead to set up her business, her clothes shop in Galway, I'd be moving back in the morning. But I suppose that there are sort of ties that can't be easily severed. But it's definitely something that's, you know, it's a hope that we all will as a family, myself and Sinead and our 2 kids, that we'll get to move back sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. I would hope. And I suppose it's, in a lot of ways, you know, COVID-19 has been obviously the most awful year that most of us have ever lived through, but it's had some unforeseen positives, particularly for places like Boffin. And it's, I suppose it's shown, actually, apologies for one minute, I just need to plug this laptop in before it dies.
We've been there.
Yeah, we know about that issue.
We wouldn't want to have any technical hiccups on an evening like this, would we?
Things have been working so smoothly.
Yeah. I suppose COVID-19 has shown that people can live and work on islands and do their job over the internet, which would have been I suppose an impossible situation if you'd asked 10 years ago. You know, there was no way the internet was ever going to support enough people to be able to make a living on the island. But what happened over Christmas time was a lot of people went home for Christmas, and then, as has been happening here, a lockdown was called, kind of a snap lockdown of the entire country. So those that were lucky enough to get home stayed put and ended up staying put for about 2 months. I, in every sense of the word, missed the boat by about a day. We were going to go in on New Year's Eve, and the lockdown got called the night before, so we missed out. But like a lot of my friends got home for 2 months and were able to work and do their jobs over the internet, and it showed that it can be done, and it's given a lot of people a whole new sense of possibilities for the future, and that they actually can live on an island and raise their families and have all the incredible benefits that come with that. You know, bringing up a family on an island and the sense of kind of peace and freedom that comes with that. But they can also do, you know, high-powered jobs over the internet, which is this incredible sort of marriage of kind of technology helping somewhere so off the beaten track to survive. And just to say that what Marco was saying about the donations, you know, the €1,000 or dollars, I'm sure which it was. Thank you to everybody who has donated. That, you know, will have a real tangible benefit in terms of helping the community centre get set up as a co-working space or as a digital hub, whatever you want to call it, so that people can take desks and either run their businesses or work from there. So that was incredible to hear. So thank you to everybody who did donate. So that's something that's being planned very soon, that the community centre will be, I suppose, changed into a place where people can work remotely. So there's any number of things going on to help those who do wish to move home, young couples and young families to move home. And in the last kind of couple of years alone, there's been 3 or 4 cases of that happening, and there's more people who are talking about moving home soon. So it's a hugely, to me anyway, it's a hugely optimistic and positive time thinking about the future of the island.
Cool. And let's turn that back to you. So what, you know, given that this has been a long-term film project in some form, and your intimate involvement, and, you know, this in some ways, you are one of the primary voices out of all of this. So what does this mean to you? What, you know, as Chesson asked, what does this end up meaning to you?
I suppose there's a lot of mix, but the predominant one for me would be, I've thought a lot about this over time. And even when I saw the first filming in the auditorium in Notre Dame, and you try and picture people leaving here in those days, and it's not, I know we are where we are at the moment in Boffin, but if you go back that far, And you have Festus leaving for the United States. You have Michael leaving for Inishbofin. And that's just to use them because this was my grandfather and my great-granduncle. But you have, they're going separate ways, but their idea at the time was they were, you know, it was never not to meet again, but they never did. And I don't even know if there were letters. There certainly were no photographs as far as I'm aware. So what I'm trying to say is from the start, it's, and I know it's probably been an even longer haul for you guys, but the amount of time and effort and research that you put in before I even spoke to you was amazing. So it's brought all of it together for us here in a way. You know, we now know where Festus went. We didn't until you started doing your research. But we do now. And we know about his family. We know, you know, where he lives. And hopefully when COVID decides to buzz off, we can, my hope would be to go and meet John. And, you know, that'd be one of the things. But we have been in touch via email, etc. Now, so for me, yes, it was very poignant. How do I do it? It's very well done in that people, you know, you had great respect for people. During filming, during interviews, and I think just brought a lot of people, you just brought a lot of people back together and maybe helped in some way bridge a gap that opened in the 1800s and stayed that way until 2018.
Yeah. I think
That makes sense.
I think one of the things, and I'll turn to Bill for a question about this in a second, but from my standpoint, one of the things that was just so fun about doing this as a project, because it's less of a film, it's more of been a project at multiple years, at multiple points, has just been the generosity of people to share stories. You know, you think of John Concannon or James, you know, both of which, you know, the point where that scene with James, for example, where he goes walking into his shed across the road. So literally, Bill and I were in filming with James and asked him about nets, asked him about pots and stuff. And he said, well, come on now, you have to see one. And he just walked out as we had all these cameras set up, and we just grabbed the cameras and we just followed him with his enthusiasm. And he took us into the shed and he started pulling things off the wall and said, here, hold this. And just sort of that willingness to have this conversation. And the same for John, where just being in front of a currach and me walking up, like a lot of the part that was filmed that one day with John repairing his currach number 3 down at the water there, was just I happened to come by and say, James, can I ask you a few questions? And he said, of course. And I said, can I film that? And he said, yeah. And then I would ask him a few more questions. And before you know it, we spent 3 hours talking about how do you saw off pieces of wood and repair fiberglass. And that's just sort of this sort of openness and generosity in the context of these conversations that were just so cool about it all. So yeah. We have 2 more questions, probably. Bill,
yeah, I would say because I know Marco wants to wrap. He was trying to wrap things up around 8:30 or so, and we have a little bit of overage. But I'm so gratified to see so many questions coming in, and so many people hanging on for this. That just makes a lot of this worthwhile. I know, just to hit a couple of points on this, and off of what we've been talking about. I think Mary was asking, can this be filmed, be seen after this? This is actually the first time this has actually been shown. Because we're looking for the right avenue, and you have to make sure film festivals, you know, want to see it. We've actually established a YouTube channel that I'm sure Ian will want to plug, that we need people to join on, and I think that's going to become a distribution so that we can. We have a lot of smaller video projects that actually highlight Inishbofin and Inishark, that are part of that. And then I think this film will then be a part of that whole structure as a distribution model. Somebody else was commenting, I think Liz is doing a project on Inishbofin and said that, you know, there's not a lot there's not a lot of written history, it's oral history. And so a lot of, I think what we found in a lot of these situations is that we were able to bring out a lot of the oral histories because I think people are much more willing to talk about all those things and just tell those stories.
Yeah.
You're saying that you do the stories change over time, and I don't think we have too much time for that. The bigger question on that, but maybe we can keep those questions going and
in other ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
So perhaps a last question, Marco, if you'll just let us go with this for a second.
Absolutely, guys.
So to Luke and Anne here, so to both of you at different points, it's been remarked to me about how it's different to be from an island, and that islanders are different, and growing up an island makes people different. And it's been said that islanders are special, and I don't mean this in a difficult way, though it could be depending. But what is that about? What is it to be an islander? You know, help us understand, what is it to be an islander? And I'm not talking about Staten Island or somewhere else that you can drive to. What is it? My apologies to Rachel on that one. What is it to be an islander? And why is that important to your identity? And Luke, let's go with you first. Let's let you play that one.
Sure. I suppose that, like, you know, there's a few things that spring to mind, and I guess because like islands by their nature, you know, there's I suppose there's nowhere more defined as a place than an island. I mean, it is such a definite boundary, so that you are, I suppose, naturally set apart from other people. And, you know, particularly in the depths of winter, you know, the days there might be no ferry, or when the ferry ties up, you know, what those who are on the island, that's it. That is your entire community. There's no spillover. There's no kind of it's a very defined kind of place. And within that, then, you know, you have to be able to do a lot of things for yourself, as both as a community and as individuals. You know, there's a few examples of things that you might not necessarily have been doing at, you know, comparable times if you grew up on, you know, solely on the mainland. So, I mean, you wouldn't be learning how to siphon, you know, petrol out of a car at 12 years of age because you needed to get somewhere driving that car, you know. Whereas you wouldn't probably have to do that at such an early point on the mainland, or, you know, you wouldn't have to know how to transport 10 or 12 sheep in a currach from one island to another as part of your daily course of events, as we often would have had to do, you know, helping out uncles, and in particular my lovely Uncle Simon, who'd be a good buddy of yours. And just to say as well, hello to all I see a lot of familiar names on the screen here as well. Just wanted to say hi to all the Notre Dame alumni who would know the island quite well over the years. And but I suppose, yeah, so things like that, you know, there's maybe a resourcefulness or a resilience built up by nature of where we're from, and these things that you take for granted when you're doing them. But I suppose when you step back and look at them and kind of go, you know, is that normal kind of to grow up like that? Is that what all teenagers are doing? You know, are they learning how to drive cars? Are they learning how to, you know, handle livestock, fish, farm, do whatever it is? You know, you need to be able to do a bit of building, bit of construction work. You have to be quite multi-talented from a very early age. So I suppose, you know, and if there is a point of difference, and I don't think it is something that islanders sit around and tell each other, we're very special, or we're any better or worse than anybody else. But you know, there is a resilience and a resourcefulness there that I would say maybe sets people apart in some shape or form. That'd be, I suppose, my thoughts on it.
Cool. Anne, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I suppose I'd agree with Luke and everything he said. And then I think I wouldn't class us as special, or I think we're maybe tougher because you are raised, like Luke said, it's in a different manner, and everybody chips in from when they can walk and talk, and that's still the same today. That hasn't changed because maybe the ways of the world are changing. If you live on an island, you have to be, to a point, self-sufficient. You know, you can go to a store and buy your groceries. We can't, as we have an island shop. Yes, we can go and get that every day, but if there's other stuff that you need, you have to go to the mainland and haul that all back and freeze it down and have it in for the winter. And you're chipping in, it doesn't matter, male or female, you know, a farm is a farm. You're out, you know, rounding up sheep, you're chasing cattle, you're digging if you have to. You know, to do things, we're pretty self-sufficient, but to do things and be self-sufficient, everybody has to be involved. So I think we're a little bit, maybe, how would I put it? I wonder, a breed apart, maybe? Would that be too far? I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, good. So look, one other last question that was asked here, and that is Ryan Lash asked the question of, would it still be possible for viewers to contribute towards the Inishbofin Broadband Project Fund? Marco, would you like to speak to that briefly for just a second to help Ryan understand that?
Starting all week, we've had rehearsal, and Ian always beats me to it whenever I want to get my 2 cents in, Ian. That's it's become a classic. Yes, Ryan, everybody else who's asked, we are happy to collect funds in contribution and collection, and put those with the money that's already been raised. And then, Ian, we can work together in order to make sure that makes its way over to Inishbofin. So yes, that is absolutely an opportunity to do that.
Then let me just wrap up. Thank you very much for that. So first of all, I want all of you, and it's not like we can applaud anybody virtually in some form, but in the context of Luke and Anne, it's now going on 1:30 your time, something like that. And even for Irish individuals who power through, especially with an 18-month child, that's going to be wearing you down a bit. So look, we really appreciate, not only from Bill and my standpoint, your participation and your heart and your investment and involvement in all this, but also sharing some of these comments and our discussion with all the people, because I think that really helps to bring it to life. So we really appreciate all of that. And again, our apologies for the technical problems with this. It's great to see that there's still 50+ people up to this late hour, given the showing. So
yeah, I will say that, we had those difficulties, but what's worked has worked really well. And despite it being 1:30, I remember being later than that, and you guys saying we sleep too much.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel too bad, but like we're heading off to bed, and that was a whole moment too. But I just it's good to see all those names like Katie and Ryan and everybody popping up, that we spent so much time over there making that, and I just miss you guys so much and can't wait to get back when this is all over.
Yeah. So thanks again, folks. We appreciate for all of you that are watching. Mary O'Callaghan and everybody else who's participated in this film, we just really appreciate you staying up this late for helping us out. So
and also the donations go a long way, because we were just talking about how can we stream this, to you and the community center the best way possible, so we can do this there, and how we can, at a more reasonable hour, and make all that stuff work. We actually have shown it in the community center. I know some of those questions actually came up. Have these been shown in the islands? We've actually shown it in Clinton. This is actually the newest version. So we have gone back and forth, but this will also help enable that.
Yeah,
in a great way.
So Anne and Luke will be talking to you about how to be able to show this in a virtual way in the community center at some point.
Yeah, and just for myself, just thanks a million for having us, guys, for having us involved in the project and this evening, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in and stuck around and sent in questions, and especially to those who donated, and thanks to Notre Dame for I suppose all the years of friendship, and you know, there's been a lot of fun, a lot of crack had over the years, and a lot of friendships, and even a marriage, as we were all celebrating a couple of years ago when Mike.
It makes me realize how long we've been gone.
Yeah. All right. So thanks again, Marco. We'll turn it over to you for your whatever words for closing.
No, I just want to reiterate a thanks to you all for making this film, to Anne, to Luke for being up with us so late, and for contributing your thoughts and your life and your culture and all your ideas throughout the film. I think that it was moving for me. From all of the conversation on chat, it was moving for all of us as well. So thank you to all of you, and a wonderful good night to you guys. And thank you to everybody that's online, and a happy St. Patrick's Day coming up very soon. So thank you very much, everybody.
And the same to you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Take care, everybody.